Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're doing a deep dive into the core ideas of the book Ancient Landmarks. It's all about finding a solid footing in a world that feels like it's changing faster than we can keep up.
The book kicks off by tapping into a feeling that I think a lot of us have, that the world our kids are growing up in is just vastly different from the one we knew. It's this feeling of constant, almost dizzying change.
And to really paint a picture of this, the author uses this fantastic analogy. They say the older generation were kind of like immigrants in this strange new world. But today's youth, they're the natives. They were born here, and all this technology and global culture, it's just normal to them.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to look at this world in flux and what the book calls the postmodern mindset. Then we'll get into the main solution, these ancient landmarks, and see how they apply to us personally and then to society before we wrap up with the author's final call to action.
So the book argues that the biggest, most important change we're seeing isn't just about technology. Nope, it's something much deeper, a fundamental shift in our collective worldview.
The author says we've moved from an era of modernism, a time that believed in objective, self-evident truth, into postmodernism, where truth and morality are often seen as relative, as subjective. And according to the book, that is the core issue that's making everything feel so unstable.
Right. So this shift to postmodern thinking is presented as the central challenge of our times. And to really crystallize this idea, the book brings in this famous quote from Nietzsche. It perfectly captures a worldview where your personal experience or my interpretation can actually feel more real than objective evidence.
So, in a world that feels like it's built on shifting sand, what's the answer? Well, the book proposes a solution that's centered around this really powerful metaphor of ancient landmarks.
And a landmark, in this context, it's not just a fence or a property line. It's a spiritual and a moral boundary. It represents these timeless, godly traditions that are meant to show us where it's safe to walk and what areas we really need to avoid.
Now, the author grounds this whole idea in Scripture, pointing to verses like this one from Proverbs. See, back in ancient times, moving someone's boundary marker was a huge deal, a serious offense. The book argues that moving these moral and spiritual markers is just as serious.
And to really emphasize the gravity of this, another key passage is cited. This isn't just a gentle suggestion, it's presented as a sacred trust that we are meant to protect.
Now, the book makes a really crucial distinction here. This is not about just blindly clinging to every old tradition. The whole argument is that we need to hold on tight to godly traditions, but we should feel totally free to discard man-made traditions that aren't actually helping anyone.
Okay, so let's make this practical. How does this whole idea of landmarks actually play out in our personal lives, in our character? The very first landmark for our personal lives is holiness. And that's defined as being set apart for God, meaning that the way you live your life should really represent godliness.
The author makes the case that this isn't some cultural variable that changes over time. It's an absolute standard. It's an unchanging landmark, based on passages just like this one.
Next up is integrity. This is presented as another one of those non-negotiable boundaries, something that shouldn't change no matter what the circumstances are.
And this scripture is used to frame integrity not as some kind of heavy burden, but as the very foundation for a secure life. It's the landmark that keeps you safe.
The book also points to a specific hierarchy of priorities as another one of these ancient landmarks for believers.
And this verse is cited as the unchanging principle here. God's kingdom has to come before our own personal ambitions. That's the landmark.
So from there, the author zooms out. They take this same framework and apply it to the bigger social institutions. Things like marriage, the workplace, and the church.
So for each of these areas, the book outlines what it considers to be these fixed, timeless principles that we have to uphold, especially against changing cultural norms. So marriage is a lifelong covenant. The family is a ministry. The workplace is a place for integrity, and the church is a place for submitting to leadership and hearing the uncompromised word.
So here's the crucial point. The book doesn't just end with an explanation. It wraps up with the direct personal call to action.
And it's a clear three-part commitment. First, you commit to living by these landmarks yourself. Second, you commit to carrying them out into the world, your job, your community. And third, you commit to passing them on to the next generation. Because, as the author concludes, the ultimate landmark is the Bible itself. And this really illustrates the central tension of the entire book, leaving us with a final thought to chew on. As the world keeps evolving around us,
Which principles, if any, should remain fixed? What boundaries are truly timeless?